Okay, take two. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to your host and MC, my good friend, Edward. Edward, it's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you first, DC Culture and History. As the Russian aggression into Ukraine continues to shock the world, persons all over the planet watch in horror and disbelief. Rallies, vigils, and prayer meetings held nightly across the globe in support of Ukraine. Nation states reversed 30 years of policy in 48 hours in order to counter Putin's Russia-determined belligerency. First, a use on terms. While media uses, quote, Ukraine-Russian conflict, close quote, and, quote, Ukraine-Russia war, quote, both terms are inappropriate. Ukraine and Russia are not equal in this. To call an invasion to subjugate a legal state, quote, a conflict, is to violate a fundamental principle of words, to speak the truth. Putin is not interested in equality. He intends domination. Good evening. This is Reparations, a Call Out. We are pausing our customary programming in order that we might this evening bring a special presentation on Russia's attack on Ukraine. Tonight's texts will include the Budapest Memorandum, 1994, current notes on the ground on the ongoing crisis of justice, and lastly, the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Your readers this evening are Tasha, Hock, Joe Adamik, and myself. My name is Ed Ingebretsen, and I will serve as your host. Thank you for joining us, and thank DC Culture and History for this important work. We spend a moment in silence to honor the dead, the dying, and those whose lives have been irredeemably weakened on all sides of the national fence by an act of imperial aggression. One, in the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, the United States, Russia, Britain committed to, quote, respect the independence and sovereignty and existing borders of Ukraine, quote, and, quote, to refrain from the threat or use of force, close quote, against the country. These assurances played a key role in persuading the Ukrainian government in Kiev to give up what amounted to the world's third largest nuclear arsenal, consisting of some 1,900 strategic nuclear warheads. President Boris Yeltsin signed the memorandum in 1994 for the Federation of Russia. Joe and Tasha will read the Budapest Memorandum.
Ukraine, Russian Federation, United Kingdom of Great Britain, and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America Memorandum on Security Assurances in connection with Ukraine's accession to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. Budapest, 5 December 1994. Entry into force, 5 December 1994 by signature, authentic texts, English, Russian, and Ukrainian. Resignation with the Secretariat of the United Nations, Ukraine, 2 October 2014.
Ukraine, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America, welcoming the accession of Ukraine to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons as a non-nuclear weapon state. Taking into account the commitment of Ukraine to eliminate all nuclear weapons from its territory within a specified period of time, noting the changes in the worldwide security situation, including the end of the Cold War, which have brought about conditions for deep reductions in nuclear forces, confirm the following. 1, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America reaffirm their commitment to Ukraine in accordance with the principles of the CSCE Final Act to respect the independence and sovereignty and the existing borders of Ukraine. 2, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America reaffirm their obligation to refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of Ukraine, and that none of their weapons will ever be used against Ukraine, except in self-defense or otherwise in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations.
3, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America reaffirm their commitment to Ukraine in accordance with the principles of the CSCE Final Act to refrain from economic coercion designed to subordinate their own interest in the exercise by Ukraine the rights inherent in the sovereignty and thus to secure advantages of any kind. 4, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America reaffirm their commitment to seek immediate United Nations Security Council action to provide assistance to Ukraine as a non-nuclear weapons state party to the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons if Ukraine should become a victim of an act of aggression or an object of threat of aggression in which nuclear weapons are used.
5, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America reaffirm, in the case of Ukraine, their commitment not to use nuclear weapons against any non-nuclear weapon state party to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, except in the case of an attack on themselves, their territories or dependent territories, their armed forces, or their allies by such a state in association or alliance with a nuclear weapon state. 6, Ukraine, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America will consult in the event of a situation arises which raises a question concerning these commitments. This memorandum will become applicable upon signature, signed in 4 copies, having equal validity in the Ukrainian, English, and Russian languages.
Signers for the Budapest Memorandum in 1994, Ukraine, the United Kingdom, the United States. Boris Yeltsin signed for the Federation of Russia. William Clinton signed for the United States. Prime Minister John Major signed for the United Kingdom. Leonid Kuchma signed for Ukraine. The events of the last few days were not the first time that Russia broke its commitments under the Budapest Memorandum. In 2014, it annexed Crimea and aggressed eastern Ukraine with little pushback from the West. Two, notes from a zone of international aggression and the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights, signed December 10th in 1948. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted by the UN General Assembly on 10 December 1948, was the result of the experience of the Second World War. With the end of that war and the creation of the United Nations, the international community vowed to never again allow atrocities like those of that conflict to happen again. World leaders decided to complement the UN Charter with a roadmap to guarantee the rights of every individual everywhere. The document they considered, and which would later become the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was taken up at the first session of the General Assembly in 1946. Tasha and John and I will read articles from the Declaration, set off against items, headlines, government comments from the ongoing violence against the country of Ukraine, a country which was declared independent in 1991.
Overview of the UDHR. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, is a milestone document in the history of human rights. Drafted by representatives with different legal and cultural backgrounds from all regions of the world, the Declaration was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris on December 10, 1948, General Assembly Resolution 217A, as a common standard of achievements for all peoples and all nations. It sets out for the first time fundamental human rights to be universally protected, and it has been translated into over 500 languages. The UDHR is widely recognized as having inspired and paved the way for the adoption of more than 70 human rights treaties applied today on a permanent basis at global and regional levels, all containing references to it in their preambles.
Preamble. Whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Whereas disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind, and the advent of a world in which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want has been proclaimed as the highest aspiration of the common people. Whereas it is essential, if man is not to be compelled to have recourse as a last resort to rebellion against tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law. Whereas it is essential to promote the development of friendly relations between nations, whereas the people of the United Nations have in the Charter reaffirmed their faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person and in the equal rights of men and women, and have determined to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. Whereas member states have pledged themselves to achieve in cooperation with the United Nations the promotion of universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Whereas a common understanding of these rights and freedoms is of the greatest importance for the full realization of this pledge.
Now, therefore, the General Assembly proclaims this Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations, to the end that every individual and every organ of society, keeping this declaration constantly in mind, shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms, and by progressive measures, national and international, to secure their universal and effective recognition and observance, both among the peoples of member states themselves and among the peoples of territories under their jurisdiction.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 1. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act toward one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Item, headline. Ukraine. Russia has attacked schools and hospitals, says the Deputy Prime Minister, March 6th.
Article 2. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Furthermore, no distinction shall be made on the basis of the political, jurisdictional, or international status of the country or territory to which a person belongs, whether it be independent, trust, non-self-governing, or under any other limitation of sovereignty. Item, headline. A strike on a Ukrainian village wreaks unimaginable human tragedy, March 6th.
Article 3. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Headline, UN official. 1.5 million refugees have fled Ukraine since the start of the war. Quote, the situation is moving so quickly and the levels of risk are so high by now that it is impossible for humanitarians to distribute systematically the aid, the help that Ukrainians desperately need, end quote, Grandi said. Quote, civilians and civilian infrastructure must be protected and spared, and humanitarian access must be granted for those delivering aid to those impacted by war. A failure to do so will compound the already extraordinary levels of human suffering, end quote, UN official.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 4. No one shall be held in slavery, or servitude. Enslavement and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all of their forms. Items. Headline, statement from President Zielinski. In video, a defiant President Zielinski says, "We are here," the New York Times. A quote, "We repeat every day, close the skies over Ukraine. Close to all Russian rockets, all military aviation for all of these terrorists. Please create a humanitarian zone without rockets, without air bombs. We are humans. It's your humanitarian duty to protect us and protect civilians, and you can do it." March 6th.
Article 5. No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Item. Fears of a nuclear catastrophe worse than the 1986 Chernobyl disaster were raised overnight to Friday when Russian shelling hit Ukraine and Europe's largest power plant, causing a fire that was later extinguished.
Security announcement during the bombing of the Ukrainian nuclear facility. Stop shooting at a nuclear dangerous facility. Stop shooting immediately. You threaten the security of the whole world. The work of the vital organs of the Zaporizhzhia station may be disrupted. It will be impossible for us to restore it. You are endangering the security of the entire world. Attention! Stop shooting at a nuclear hazardous facility. Stop shooting at a nuclear hazardous facility. Stop shooting at a nuclear hazardous facility. Attention! Stop it! Article 6. Everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. Headline, besieged Ukrainian city launches fresh effort to evacuate civilians.
Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 7. All are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. All are entitled to equal protection against any discrimination in violence of this declaration and against any incitement to such discrimination. Item, headline. My city is dust. Woman flees Kharkiv after house bombed. The 5th of March.
Article 8. Everyone has the right to an effective remedy by the competent national tribunals for acts violating the fundamental rights granted him by the Constitution or by law. Item, headline. Open the door or we die. Africans report racism and hostility trying to free Ukraine.
Article 9. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. Item, headline. Police arbitrarily detained hundreds of peaceful protesters across Russia on February 24th, 2022, at rallies in solidarity with Ukraine and against the war. Human Rights Watch said today.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 10. Everyone is entitled in full equality to a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal in the determination of his rights and obligations and of any criminal charge against him.
Article 11. Anyone charged with a penal offense has the right to be presumed innocent until proved guilty according to law in a public trial at which he has had all the guarantees necessary for his defense. No one shouldn't be held guilty of any penal offense on account of any act or omission which did not constitute a penal offense under national or international law at the time when it was committed, nor shall a heavier penalty be imposed than the one that was applicable at the time of the penal offense was committed.
Article 12. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon his honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to the protection of the law against such interference or attacks. Item, quote, I am a historian. I realize that we are living through a moment that will be on every syllabus of European history. Now is the time to decide what place each of us wants to have in that history. Stand with Ukraine. Marcy Shore, Associate Professor of Modern European Intellectual History, Yale University.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 13. Everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. 2. Everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and to return to his country. Item, headline. NATO chief says Russia has used cluster bombs in Ukraine against civilians and citizens.
Article 14. 1. Everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. 2. This right may not be invoked in the case of prosecutions genuinely arising from non-political crimes or from acts contrary to the purpose and principles of the United Nations. Item, headline. Boris Johnson, Vladimir Putin, guilty of war crimes. British Prime Minister welcomed a decision by the International Crime Court to investigate attacks against civilians in Ukraine.
Article 15. 1. Everyone has the right to a nationality. 2. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality nor denied the right to change his nationality. Item, headline. Zielinski says Russia wants to, quote, erase Ukraine as war enters 7th day.
The Universal Declaration, Article 16. 1. Men and women of full age without any limitation due to race, nationality, or religion have the right to marry and to found a family. They are entitled to equal rights as to marriage, during marriage and at its dissolution. 2. Marriage shall be entered into one with the free and full consent of the intending spouses. 3. The family is the natural and fundamental group of society and is entitled to protection by society and the state.
Article 17. Everyone has the right to own property alone as well as in association with others. 2. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his property. Item. China asked Russia to delay invasion of Ukraine until after Olympics. Western intelligence shows.
Article 18. Everyone has the right of freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. Item. Headline. More than 3,500 people were detained in about 50 cities at protests against the invasion of Ukraine.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19. Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers.
Article 21. 1. Everyone has the right to take part in the government of his country, directly or through freely chosen representatives. 2. Everyone has the right of equal access to public service in his country. 3. The will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government. This will shall be expressed in periodic and genuine elections, which shall be by universal and equal suffrage, and shall be held by secret vote or by equivalent free voting procedures. Item. Headline. UN General Assembly votes overwhelmingly to censure Russia. NBC, March 2nd.
The Universal Declaration on Human Rights, Article 22. Everyone, as a member of society, has the right to Social Security and is entitled to realization through national effort and international cooperation and in accordance with the organization and resources of each state, to the economic, social, and cultural rights indispensable for his or her dignity and the free development of his or her personality.
Article 23. 1. Everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. 2. Everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work. 3. Everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. 4. Everyone has the right to form and to join trade unions for the protection of his or her interests.
Article 25, number 1. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. 2, Motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. All children, whether born in or out of wedlock, shall enjoy the same social protection. Item, headline, Russia attacked Ukrainian hospitals, violating humanitarian law, WHO says.
Article 26. 1. Everyone has the right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Elementary education shall be compulsory. Technical and professional education shall be made generally available, and higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. 2. Education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial or religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. Item, inside the harrowing journey to evacuate critically ill children out of Ukraine.
Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 28. Everyone is entitled to a social and international order in which the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration can be fully realized.
Article 29. 1. Everyone has duties to the community in which alone the free and full development of his or her personality is possible. 2. In the exercise of his rights and freedoms, everyone shall be subject only to such limitations as are determined by law solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others, and of meeting the just requirements of morality, public order, and the general welfare in a democratic society. 3. These rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purpose and principles of the United Nations.
Article 30. Nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as implying for any state, group, or person any right to engage in any activity or to perform any act aimed at the destruction of any of the rights and freedoms set forth herein. Item, headline, Russia's role at UN under scrutiny as Ukraine calls for Security Council vote to be removed. United Nations, published February 28th, 2022.
The International Court of Justice will hold public hearings next week over accusations of genocide in Ukraine. The International Court of Justice, ICJ, in The Hague will hold public hearings starting Monday over claims of genocide.
In a statement Tuesday, the ICJ said public hearings will be held next Monday and Tuesday regarding the case concerning allegations of genocide under the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, Ukraine versus Russian Federation. In its application to institute proceedings against Russia, Ukraine said Russia has falsely claimed that acts of genocide have occurred in the separatist regions of Luhansk and Donetsk, adding Russia then subsequently declared and implemented a special military operation against Ukraine, according to an earlier ICJ news release. Ukraine denied these claims in its application and accused Russia of planning acts of genocide in the country, according to the news release. The hearings will be held at the Peace Palace in The Hague, the seat of the court, and will be devoted to Ukraine's request for the indication of provisional measures, the statement said.
In a separate statement Tuesday, the ICJ said the president of the International Court of Justice, Judge Joan E. Donoghue, has sent an urgent communication to the Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. The communication said, quote, "I have the honor to refer to the request for the indication of provisional measures filed in the proceedings instituted by Ukraine against the Russian Federation on the 26th of February, 2022. Acting in conformity with Article 74, Paragraph 4 of the Rules of Court, I hereby call the attention of the Russian Federation to the need to act in such a way as will enable any order the court may make on the request for provisional measures to have its appropriate effects," end quote. The ICJ said Tuesday that in view of the COVID-19 pandemic, the hearings next week will be held in a hybrid format. It said some members of the court will attend the oral proceedings in person in the Great Hall of Justice, while others will participate remotely by video link.
These texts may not be known to some, they may be known by many. It is good on occasion to repeat them and to repeat the Charter of the United Nations that says that every one of us in our hearing tonight, and even in places that do not have these accesses, have an access to law and an order that is guaranteed by right and human dignity. And finally this, on the United Nations floor in assembly, days before the aggression of Ukraine's territorial space and its people. Headline item, Ukrainian ambassador to the UN. The entire UN is under attack by Russia's actions. And this 22nd of February. Program note. Russia is one of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, along with the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and China. This position grants those countries veto power, which means that the Council cannot adopt a resolution if any member votes against it, regardless of its level of international support. This month, the Russian ambassador is chair of the Security Council. The motion was voted down. Leo Tolstoy, Russia's greatest novelist, writes in his scathing notes on the neglect of the Russian people by imperial authority, "What is to be done?" An 1887 book. Lenin later used the same title in 1902, "What is to be done?" We repeat it again. What is to be done? Tolstoy writes, "There can only be one permanent revolution, a moral one, the regeneration of the inner man. How is this revolution to take place? Nobody knows how it will take place in humanity, but every person must feel it clearly and closely in her or himself. And yet in our world, everybody thinks of changing humanity, and nobody thinks of changing himself." Good evening, and for those who joined us, I want to thank Tasha and Joseph. Thank those who took the time this evening. Thank you for being part of a permanent revolution and revision of justice. In a world trying to be free and trying to free itself from the shadows of colonialism and empire, we are still doing the work of dismantling that. Good night, and thanks to everyone. Stand with justice in the world you move in the ways that you can. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Edward. For anyone joining us late, this program is being recorded. It'll be posted on our YouTube page Probably not till tomorrow, though, because we have another program later this evening. Really want to thank our host for joining us and doing this very moving reading for us. And then also, too, thanks to our audience members for participating. Before we sign off, do any of our panelists have any closing remarks outside of the readings that they've just done? Anything else that they want to add? If not, no worries, but always like to give people opportunity if they want to share any final thoughts before we sign off.
Robert, I think the UN speaks for itself, and for my part.
Okay. Okay, well, let's call it a wrap. Again, the program is being recorded. It'll be posted on our YouTube page. Thanks so much for our readers and also for our audience for joining us. And everyone have a great rest of your weekend. Stay safe. We'll pray for peace, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.